Welcome to American Moderate News for January 2019. I'm Mark Jimenez. American Moderate News is not conservative, not liberal, independent. This month, the biggest and most immediate issue facing the nation is the government shutdown. And more on that in just a moment. But first, we want to pause to pay our respects to two American patriots that passed away in 2018. Senator John McCain, that endured so much, fighting for our country in uniform, and President George H.W. Bush, also a combat veteran that risked it all serving the nation. May they rest in peace. And now, to American Modern News' issue of the month, the government shutdown. And so here we are, in the longest government shutdown in the nation's history. How did we get here? And just as important, how do we get out of this? People are getting hurt. It's hurting the ability of the government to govern. And Fitch, a credit agency, has now stated that if the shutdown continues, they will downgrade our credit rating as a nation, and that will raise borrowing costs and debt service to our already large national debt. A real problem that American Moderate News believes should be solved. First of all, from the conservative perspective, the U.S. government has miles and miles of border fence with Mexico, about 700 miles. Congress has previously approved funding for a fence under previous presidents, Republican and Democrat. It doesn't seem like too much to ask to put $5 billion into a fence. Besides, despite the fact that may or may not be an effective or cost-effective way to fight drugs and crime, many Americans want the wall. Yes, it's a minority, but it is a very large minority of 43%. Now, some in that number are there for claims and fears that are exacerbated by lies from people like Hannity on Fox News, who has quoted misleading information about the crisis at the border. But the desire is real. Besides, the head of the Border Patrol, in charge of our security at the border, has stated that although they don't want the Great Wall of China along the southern border, which would be ridiculously expensive, it would pose a threat to water flows and cause floodings in some areas, and pose economic and environmental issues as well as challenges by property owners. But despite all of that, there are some areas that are extremely difficult to police, and a barrier, call it what you may, would provide some help in those areas. So, should liberals give in to that, or the Congress give in to it? Yes, actually, it's been Republicans and Democrats that have supported opening the government. But should Congress pass a bill that authorizes some form of a barrier? Normally, yes. We believe so. But not under the current situation. A crisis that has been brought about by the President sending an ultimatum to Congress that if they don't give in to his demands, whatever they may be at the time, he will do something terribly destructive. In this case, he has shut down his own government. Even though at the time of the shutdown, Republicans control the House and Republicans control the Senate. And though Republicans and Democrats overwhelmingly approve a bill that didn't give him $5 billion, gave them $25 billion, 5 times as much, for border security, though not a fence. At American Moderate News, we believe that if you believe in functional democracy, and you believe in this country as a free nation with a system of checks and balances to prevent abuses of power, this simply cannot be the way we conduct business. It is reckless, ineffective, and damaging. People are getting hurt. The nation is getting hurt. We believe this kind of action is the reason why Secretary of Defense James Mattis resigned the administration. He stated as much in his letter. The President of the United States' view are a danger to our democracy, but a serious concern to us is the Trump base, who claims to be patriotic and pro-military, which they are, seems to have not even been faced by this. There was nothing, no response about this. The new shiny object is the border wall. Maybe that's the reason the President is doing it this way, a distraction. We don't know. But let's take a look at the facts. Is there a crisis at the border? Well, the president has made 6 points again and again. Number 1, is there an infestation of immigrants? Actually, for several years there has been a net reduction of immigration through the southern border. In other words, more are leaving than coming. That's not an invasion of any kind. Are the immigrants carrying disease? Well, maybe someone's got a cold when they walk across the border, but these people are not lepers, and they're at least healthy enough to walk thousands of miles with kids. So no, there's no diseases coming through in any significant way. Now, are immigrants bringing crime and violence? Well, certainly conservatives could make a case, anyone with common sense, whether you're conservative or liberal, can certainly make the case there are documented cases where an immigrant has hurt or even killed another person. But that is misleading. Immigrant populations have lower crime rates than U.S. native populations. Further, there have been over 310 mass shootings in the United States, something that American Moderate News believes is a real crisis. And the number of illegal immigrants that came from the southern border involved in those 310 mass shootings in 2018? 0. So that's not a problem that can't be managed. It is a problem, but it's not a crisis. Now, a case that makes more sense, would a wall stop illegal immigration? Certainly conservatives can point to the fact that it would slow some of it down. But again, remember that the net flows are negative. Further, 40%, a full 40% of illegal immigration comes from airports. People come here legally and overstay their visas. So that seems to be somewhat ineffective. But that doesn't make a case for not trying to do something to help our Border Patrol officers do something on the southern border. Now, are terrorists coming from the southern border? This is a concern to me and to at American Moderate News. The claim by the administration that 4,000 terrorists came across the southern border is false. It's a complete fabrication and lie. Chris Wallace from Fox News put Sarah Huckabee Sanders on an awkward position by pointing out that was a flat-out lie. There have been 7 cases where people were identified as potential threats coming over the border. And after review, none of them were arrested. By contrast, over 30 people raised flags for possible terrorism from the border with Canada. Are we going to build another border wall with Canada as well? And are the Canadians going to pay for this one? Number 6, are drugs coming in from the southern border? Yes, and they're devastating. That is a crisis. But the facts are, the vast majority come through legal ports of entry, not carried by immigrants over the desert. And by the way, if drugs are really the concern, which is truly a clear and present danger in America, no one stops more drugs than the Coast Guard. And right now, they're not getting paid because of the president's shutdown. As we stated at the beginning of this report, we believe that Congress should recognize that a large portion of Americans want a wall. Even though a majority doesn't, it is a significantly large minority. And virtually everyone wants more security at the border. So despite the populist lies regarding the threat, some funds should be made available to build structures on the border that help the Border Patrol do their jobs. However, we don't believe that this is the way to do it. Congress should not abdicate its responsibility to hold the purse strings of what amounts to terrorist tactics by the administration. That would constitute a much larger threat to our way of life than the current problems at the southern border. By the way, there is a problem at the southern border and it needs fixing, but it's not a crisis. The President of the United States should take the $25 billion for border security they were offered by bipartisan legislation, which is 5 times the amount he asked for the wall and allows millions of Americans to go back to work and behave like a functional democracy. At American Moderate News, we believe, due to the divisive partisanship, which the President of the United States is exacerbating, we're sliding away from democratic principles and into supporting authoritarian solutions. This trend, if unchecked, poses a real and present danger to America. This is why the House should not join the Senate under Mitch McConnell in abdicating its responsibilities as a co-equal branch of government responsible for the purse strings of the nation. The government of the United States should not allow a reckless leader to shatter the system of checks and balances through intimidation. This should not stand, not a single penny, for anything via this type of intimidation. We should reach solutions through compromise, dialogue, analysis of facts, and compromise. We want to ask our American Moderate News viewers to take this crisis or the next crisis, because there will always be another cliffhanger, an endless slew of crisis after crisis under this administration, and ask the question, is this really helping our country become a better place? Or is it just the president agitating his base, even if it hurts the nation? Like Admiral McRaven, former head of the Joint Special Operations Command, when this is all said and done and Trump is gone, we want there to be no question that at American Moderate News we spoke up against this totalitarian tendency with no respect for our democracy and our institutions. Not a liberal, not a conservative, but an American moderate that wants to defend the nation's core values and a system of checks and balances that includes a free press and a Congress that controls the purse strings, as our founding fathers intended. Democrats have supported the president in criminal justice reform. If the president negotiates in good faith, we might actually get something done. The Democratic House and many Republicans want DACA to be settled and a real and solid plan to address legal immigration. There is plenty of room to negotiate. This is a fabricated crisis. Even if you are one of the 43% that support the wall, this is not how to do it. Americans need to work together and find compromise. That's democracy. And if you're willing to throw it away for whatever the pet project is today or tomorrow, then that in itself is a larger crisis and a greater danger than any problem at the border.